They opened a well that should have stayed sealed. It had been closed for 20 years. No one remembered why, but the county had forgotten 14 people. They didn't run away. They were buried.
In the summer of 1887, the heat in Warren County, Mississippi, settled like a living thing. It clung to the earth, to the trees, to the aging homes built before the war. The cicadas screamed in the afternoon, and the Mississippi River moved slowly beyond the tree line, heavy and indifferent. On a stretch of land locals called Voss Hill stood a weathered plantation house that had survived more than it deserved to. Its white columns were cracked, its shutters warped, and its paint long surrendered to the humidity. Yet the structure still projected a quiet authority, the lingering ghost of a family that once held power there. The house belonged to Edmund Voss, or rather, it had belonged to his father. Colonel Nathaniel Voss had been a respected landowner before the Civil War. He had served in local politics, commanded loyalty, and maintained a reputation for discipline and order. During the war, much of that order collapsed. After it, the South was unrecognizable. Plantations struggled, labor systems dissolved, wealth eroded. But some secrets survived. Edmund returned to Mississippi in early June of 1887 after receiving word of his father's death. He had spent years in Tennessee working as a surveyor, distancing himself from the burdens of his family's legacy. He arrived at Voss Hill expecting paperwork, repairs, and the tedious dismantling of a fading estate. He did not expect the well. The well stood 50 yards behind the house, partially hidden by tall grass and creeping vines. Its circular stone lip was sealed with thick wooden planks bolted into place. Iron brackets reinforced the structure, as if someone had gone to great effort to ensure it would never be opened. Edmund had no memory of it being sealed. When he asked Elias Crowder, the aging groundskeeper who had remained on the property through war and Reconstruction, the old man avoided his eyes. "It was closed in '67, Crowder said quietly. "Why?" Edmund asked. Crowder hesitated. "Orders from your father." "And the reason?" The old man's answer was simple. "Safety." But the word felt rehearsed. Edmund learned that the well had been sealed in October of 1867, the same year 14 freed men and women were reported missing from Warren County. Officially, the records described them as transient laborers who had moved on in search of better opportunities. No investigations followed, no bodies were found. The South, at that time, had other concerns. Reconstruction had brought federal oversight, military presence, and new laws that redefined citizenship and voting rights. Tensions ran high. Former Confederates bristled under supervision. Freedmen attempted to establish independence amid hostility and fear. In such a climate, disappearances did not always inspire urgency. Still, something about the sealed well disturbed Edmund. It disturbed him more when he entered his father's study. Behind a locked cabinet drawer, he discovered a leather-bound ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were entries dated between August and October of 1867. The handwriting was precise and unmistakably his father's. But the entries were not financial accounts. They were lists of names. 14 names, each followed by brief notations: disloyal, agitator, inciting others, ungrateful.
One entry chilled him most. October 12. Resolution achieved. Order restored. There was no further explanation.
Edmund sat in that study long after dusk, the ledger open in his hands, while shadows stretched across the walls. Outside, the sealed well waited in silence. The following morning, he ordered Crowder to gather tools. They began removing the bolts from the wooden planks. Each turn of the wrench echoed against stone. Crowder's hands trembled. "Best leave it," the old man muttered once, but Edmund persisted. By noon, the final plank was lifted. A breath of air rose from the darkness below, cool, stale, ancient. Edmund leaned over the stone rim and peered inside. The water level was lower than expected, and something pale floated near the surface. The sheriff was summoned. Deputies arrived with lanterns and rope. A pulley system was rigged, and one man descended slowly into the shaft. Those standing above heard only the drip of water and the scrape of boots against stone. Then came the shout. What they retrieved over the next hours confirmed what the ledger had suggested. Skeletal remains, multiple. Some tangled in decayed fabric, others bound with rusted wire. Fragments of clothing consistent with work garments of the late 1860s. Buttons, a shoe sole, a broken metal clasp. By evening, 14 sets of remains had been counted. The sealed well of Voss Hill had preserved its secret for 20 years. News spread rapidly through Warren County. Newspapers in Jackson and Vicksburg carried headlines that blended shock with caution. Some referred to the discovery as a tragic accident of unknown origin. Others hinted at darker interpretations. But the timing could not be ignored. October 1867, the height of Reconstruction tensions. Records revealed that several of the missing individuals had recently registered to vote under new federal protections. 2 had been involved in organizing freed labor contracts that challenged exploitative terms. And all 14 had last been seen within walking distance of Voss Hill. Edmund felt the weight of revelation settle heavily upon him. He had admired his father as a disciplined patriarch. Now that image fractured under the evidence emerging from the earth. Sheriff Daniel Mercer, cautious but methodical, reopened the missing persons reports from 1867. Depositions were gathered from elderly residents. Many claimed ignorance, others offered fragments of memory. A night of shouting, wagon wheels in darkness, armed riders moving quietly along the road. One former domestic worker, now living in Vicksburg, spoke with trembling certainty. "They was called to a meeting," she said, "told they'd be given land papers, said the colonel wanted to settle accounts fair. No one saw them return." The investigation pressed forward, but obstacles emerged quickly. Colonel Nathaniel Voss was dead. Several men who had served under him during the war were also deceased. Records from 1867 were incomplete, damaged, or mysteriously absent. And in Mississippi of 1887, confronting crimes from the early Reconstruction era was not encouraged. There were those who argued the well discovery should remain a private family tragedy. Others insisted reopening the past would only inflame old wounds. Edmund found himself isolated. Neighbors who once greeted him politely now avoided his gaze. Invitations ceased, conversations shortened. Voss Hill, already decaying, felt further removed from the community. Yet he continued searching his father's belongings. In a hidden compartment behind the study fireplace, he uncovered additional documents, correspondence with 2 local businessmen and a former militia captain. The letters spoke obliquely of maintaining order and neutralizing disruptive influences. One line stood out: "The well is deep and memory is shallow." Edmund read that sentence repeatedly. It carried calculation, intention. The state eventually convened a quiet inquiry. No formal charges were issued. There were no living defendants to prosecute. Officially, the deaths were categorized as undetermined homicides, but unofficially, the truth had settled. The 14 freed men and women had not wandered north. They had been silenced. The well was sealed not for safety, but for secrecy. As autumn approached, Edmund made a decision that further alienated him from local society. He ordered the remains to be exhumed respectfully and reburied in consecrated ground. A modest memorial stone was erected near the hill, listing each of the 14 names recovered from the ledger. Some residents objected. They claimed it dishonored the Voss family. Edmund disagreed. "It dishonors no one," he told Sheriff Mercer. "It corrects what was buried." The dedication ceremony was small. A minister from a nearby black church delivered a prayer. Descendants of 2 of the victims, traced through county records, attended quietly. The wind that day was steady. The well, now emptied and dismantled, stood open, its stones removed one by one until only disturbed earth remained. Voss Hill never recovered its former stature. Edmund sold most of the land within 3 years and relocated permanently to Tennessee. Before leaving, he commissioned a final act. He had the plantation house demolished. Where it once stood, only open field remained. Today, historians debate the sealed well of Voss Hill as a case study of suppressed violence during Reconstruction. It represents a pattern repeated in pockets across the South, acts of intimidation designed to reverse the fragile progress of emancipation. The 14 names carved into the memorial stone endure. The house does not. And the well, once a symbol of concealment, became instead a conduit for truth. In 1867, it swallowed voices. In 1887, it returned them. And in doing so, it transformed a private inheritance into a public reckoning.